I'd like to invite Clayton Mullins up now. He'll be our first speaker this morning. Clayton is one of our ECE coordinators, and next year he'll be stepping into the role of co-principal for our ECE. Clayton's going to be talking about tantrums and meltdowns this morning.
Good morning. My name's Clayton, and so great to have you all here today. I'm really excited to speak to you a little bit about tantrums and meltdowns. So the next slide I'm going to show, there are going to be two pictures on there. But before I show you those pictures, I want to ask, do any of you have children that are 3, 4, or 5 years of age? 3, 4, or 5? Okay, how about 1 or 2? Okay, so there's a number. So I'm going to show you these pictures, and I want you to look at them and to think, can you relate to these pictures at all? Here we go. Can any of you relate to those pictures? In English, we would say that that's called a tantrum, okay? We use the word tantrum, which is when a child is crying, screaming, kicking, they're throwing themselves down to the floor. I love this picture over here. This is in a shopping center. How many of you have ever been to Fusion or Taste, and suddenly your child decides to have a tantrum? And out from around the aisle, you see the papas and the grandpas staring at you, and then the university students with their arms crossed, and the high school students walking along, looking back, saying, wow, they must be bad parents. Right? That's pretty common. And you as a parent, you're probably sitting there saying, oh no, why now? Please stop. This is so embarrassing. Everybody's looking at me. Other parents are looking at me. This is so frustrating. You know, have you been in that situation? Have you ever thought what your child might be experiencing at that moment? Like what's going through your child's mind? Well, research would suggest that the child who's down low, who's looking up to the world around them, that inside their mind they might have words like this. Why does no one understand me? Why can't I? What's wrong with it? Why can't I pull all the rice off the table? Why can't I take everything off the shelf? I'm so happy playing here. I don't want to. So why a tantrum? Why do children have tantrums? Why does your child put you in that situation? Are they trying to frustrate you? Are they just trying to irritate you? The real reason is that, and this is probably one of the most important things I want to try and convey today, is that tantrums are normal. Research would tell us that for a child between the age of 1 and 3, that a tantrum is crucial and part of their developmental process, because what they're doing is they're learning to communicate. They're telling us what they want, what they need. They're telling us they don't want to be interrupted, or they do want something or don't want something. Now, I've got this little story which I think helps illustrate this communication really well. So I used to live in Sharton, and every day after work, I would catch a 5-minute taxi from Sharton to where I lived, which is Ravana Garden. And this one particular day, I got back after work, jumped into a taxi, and I said, good afternoon, please can I go to Ravana Garden? And with that, the taxi driver turned over and looked back at me and spoke in Chinese, as we would, right? We're in Hong Kong. And he was expressing he had no idea what I was saying. So I tried in my best Chinese to say, Bang King Fayan, of which he looked back more confused. Am I speaking a foreign language? I tried with different paces, different intonations. As hard as I tried, I could not pronounce the Cantonese direction to my house. At that moment, I reflected and thought, the taxi driver is the parent. I'm the child. I have all these thoughts happening in my mind. I'm talking as much as I can. And this parent, the taxi driver, has no idea what I'm saying. And even as adults, what do? We try to use our body, right? 5 minutes that way, turn left. Now, that story is exactly what our young children are doing. This picture over here shows that children have got so many thoughts happening inside their mind, right? It's like me in that taxi. I've got so many thoughts. However, they've only got a few words that they can use. Now, this over here is a generalization, okay? This comes from Australia, it comes from their government website. I have to tell you, because in Hong Kong we like statistics, this is a generalization based on English, okay? And there's a huge fluctuation. Your child could speak 5 times that, they could speak 5 times less. I spoke to a family earlier whose child is learning 3 languages. So this is just a reference to try and illustrate what's happening. But what I'm trying to illustrate is that in Australia, the research says that a child has about 50 words that they understand, but they're only able to use 3 of those words. By the time a child is 3 years old, they have around 1,000 words going on inside their mind, but they're only using 200. Now that's exactly what happens, is that they have a whole lot going on in their mind and very little ability to communicate. So the result is the use of a tantrum, which is expressing how frustrated they are. They use that through crying and screeching, shouting. These will often happen at these times, which I know all your parents are familiar with. Bathing time, eating, sleep time, or I don't want to leave the playroom. I'm quite happy here, sat down on the floor. I'm not going anywhere. I see families smiling. You guys all relate to this, right? So this is my daughter. So she just turned 1. Now I'm going to share a quick story about a tantrum because in a little bit I'm going to explain the difference between a tantrum and a meltdown. How we can show that something's a tantrum is that a child is able to calm down once they finish. So in this story over here, it's at nighttime just before bed, and my daughter, I've put a diaper on, I've put her first layer of clothes on, and you can see I'm trying to put on her outer layer. But at that point, she decided that she had had enough. She started shouting, screaming. You can see she's kicking her legs and holding her feet. She is protesting. She is communicating that she is not happy. She decided to roll over and make a run for it. And she's gone. And I can tell you she was extremely frustrated. But 2 seconds later, you know what she does? She turns around and starts laughing. Now that's a tantrum, right? Because what I shared earlier is that it's when children are able to, they're still in control of their emotions, okay? So I'm going to share just a little bit about how we respond to tantrums at YCIS. And this comes from research. The first thing is that point that I mentioned earlier. It's about understanding what is going on. Your child is not trying to fight with you. They're trying to communicate with you. When we have that perspective, I think it helps us to be a lot more patient with young children. I'm speaking in particular about children in the age range of 1 to 3. We can have a conversation another time about older children. So what we use, and I'm going to only briefly go through these because our other speakers will be going through them in more depth in a moment, is something which we say is sportscasting. A tool that we use quite regularly for those that will join us at YCIS possibly is we state what we see. So for instance, I would say, it looks like you don't want to lie down any longer and have your clothes put on. When I do this, I'm communicating that I understand what's going on to my child. Afterwards, we use a skill called acknowledging feelings, which is to give language to what they may be feeling. So it looks like you're frustrated and angry, which helps really build a connection. Now, my daughter's able to start putting words to these incredible emotions that she's feeling inside. We state boundaries. You need to have clothes on because your body needs to stay warm. And then we offer choices. Choices give child power and the support, the boundary. Because at the end of the day, my daughter needs to have her clothes on, right? But when I give her a choice, I create an opportunity for her to feel powerful. But the choices don't say that you don't have to do it anymore. She still has to have her clothes on. So in this example, just something simple. And these 4 things will be spoken about in a moment, how they can be applied to so many different situations and scenarios. Do you want to put your clothes on while you're lying down or standing up? The clothes still have to go on, but we allow her to become powerful in the moment. So for her, that always works. She likes to have her clothes on when she's standing up. So, a tantrum and a meltdown. Now, what is the difference? I've explained to you what a tantrum is. And the reason why I want to try and explain this and try and unpack this is that when you see your child on the floor, crying, shouting, there are 2 things that might be happening. And they both have to do with what's happening inside the brain. A tantrum is controlled, it's purposeful, they're communicating something. Okay? But a meltdown is opposite to that in terms of they're overwhelmed, they've lost control. Now, I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm going to explain very briefly what's happening here in very simple terms. We got the upstairs part of the brain, and you got the downstairs part of the brain. For this, I'm going to use my hand as an illustration. Dr. Daniel Siegel, he's got a picture, okay? And he's drawn a house over there. Now, he refers to, and you guys can also practice this at home, this part is going to be the upstairs, okay? That I'm waving my fingers. And this, my thumb, is the downstairs. Now, the upstairs part is a part of the brain that has thinking, reasoning, understanding. Okay, this is the intelligent part. My thumb is the downstairs part. Now, the downstairs part is emotions. It is the strong feelings that you have. It's the instinct. Now, all of our brains, when they're working properly, they look like that, okay? Your emotions and the strong feelings that you have are filtered through your intellect. It allows you to have self-control. So, a child that's having a tantrum, they're still in control. Their brain is working well. That's why when my daughter got out of the situation, she could laugh immediately, because her brain is still actually working normally. But what happens in a meltdown is what in the educational circles they've termed flipping your lid, is when that cognitive part of your brain doesn't work anymore. And the child is now living by their strong emotions. So the meltdown picture. So why is this important? Because they almost look the same. But if you're speaking to a child having a meltdown, at that moment, there's no ways that they can understand what you're saying. You're speaking to a child who has lost all ability to reason, to think, especially for older children. I've worked with a lot of children who are 4 years of age. You can have a lot of conversations with them, and they can have these complex situations that they come up with, and they're reasoning and they're talking to you. But when they have a meltdown, you're talking to them, but there's no understanding. There's no one there. They are living by the strong instinct and emotion. So what do we do then if a child's in that situation? Well, to tell the differences, are they able to calm down? Tantrum. Are they not able to calm down by themselves afterwards? Meltdown. Are they in control of their behavior? For a tantrum, these are all yes. Are they looking for a reaction? Tantrum, yes. So the most important is that if you're able to determine whether your child is having a tantrum or a meltdown, allows you to give them time if they're having a meltdown. You need to make sure that they stay safe, and you give them time for their brain to reset so that everything goes back to normal. Then after that, you can start to engage with conversations. Now, in the short time that we've had, I've really given injustice to this great topic, because this really takes a lot of time to unpack and to be able to speak about it. And this is something that we work on and speak with families at our school. But today I've really just tried to give you a quick overview. You'll have some booklets that you can take home that have some notes on them. But if I can leave you with 3 things. The first thing is, remember, your child is not trying to fight against you. That tantrums is a way of communicating, that this is normal, okay? When parents are looking at you inside the supermarket and thinking that you're a poor parent, try to ignore them as hard as it is. Use those 4 skills that will be built on in a moment. And the last point is, just remember to try and look from the child's perspective. The second picture I showed of the child inside the big forest area, what's going on in their mind? They're also confused. They're trying to communicate, just like I was in the taxi. Thank you.